Question is from the audience. Do you support a Maryland law to reverse Weiss-Schaefer and shift the burden of proof from special ed parents to MCPS?
Can you repeat that?
Do you support a Maryland law to reverse Weiss-Schaefer and shift the burden of proof from special ed parents to MCPS?
You know, I'm a special ed parent, and I would like to see a lot of those regulations just go away. In lieu of more regulations to force compliance, I would like to see, again, an approach to education in MCPS where we work with each student's strengths, meet their challenges, include them in the community, let them know that they're valued. These are educational approaches that can work, that do work, that are at work in many other school districts. There's no reason MCPS can't do this.
Excuse me, in fairness, could you explain what Weiss versus Schaefer is? I happen to know, but I bet a lot of people in this room don't.
I'm happy to explain. Yeah, sure. Weiss-Schaefer is, it's actually Weiss v. Schaefer. It's probably not the exact court case. It's a court case that went up to the Supreme Court of the very Supreme Court, oops, and it switches the burden of proof from the school system to the from the school system to the parent.
No.
From the parent to the school system.
Neither.
Okay.
Schaefer versus Weiss started, it's a Montgomery County case, special education case involving a young man named Brian Schaefer, who happened to be a friend of my son, and a dispute that his parents had with Montgomery County Public Schools over his appropriate placement. They went to a local level hearing and then appealed various decisions all the way up to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court found that the party challenging the IEP has the burden of establishing that the IEP does not provide free and appropriate public education. Other states, most notably,
Or does. That the person,
Or does.
The person bringing the suit is the person who gets the burden of proof. And it is almost always the parent who brings the case, because it's almost always the parent who disagrees.
Right, because parental consent to implement IEPs is not required after the initial IEP. So the reason this is coming up now is because there's a movement afoot to introduce a bill in the Maryland legislature to shift the burden of proof to where the school system, who has all the experts and all the employees, should have the burden of establishing that their IEP is appropriate. Other states have done so, notably New York and I think New Jersey.
And most recently Nevada. They've come out and said, and in fact there were several states when Weiss v. Schaefer went up who filed briefs and said, look, the school system should have a burden of proof because it helps us to write a better IEP.
And now that we all understand a little bit more, could you restate the question and start again?
Do you support a Maryland law to reverse Weiss versus Schaefer and shift the burden of proof from special education parents to MCPS?
So, as I was saying, as a special ed parent, I'm extremely frustrated, and you can imagine the burden of proof that falls to parents who are trying to get a free, appropriate public education for their children. It winds up costing them enormous time. They have to get themselves a PhD in law to figure this stuff out. They have to spend time above and beyond their jobs to teach the school system about their children and how to teach their children. I do support it because I have spent so many years across the table saying, why am I telling you this? You should be telling me this. Yes, the schools need to take that responsibility. They have to shoulder the burden for providing a free, appropriate public education for every child that meets their needs. So I do support it. But again, I don't think that the best way to achieve that is by lots and lots more legislation and lots more compliance battles. I think that the schools can and should step up to its responsibility by providing a better regular education all around and having better oversight of the funds through a cost analysis of educational programs, so that we are making sure we conserve the funds for those marginal student needs that will exist. There's no flattening the learning curve here. Special education is special for a reason, and it always will be, and we have to address that. And it does take more resource. It takes more mediation for that student to learn. So we have to recognize that, and we have to commit the funds to that. The same thing for students who are advanced learners and need to move faster. They need more also. We need to dedicate the funds for that as well. So I do support it, but I would like to see MCPS address education and learning better all around.
Yes, I would support that, absolutely. It makes just good common sense, right? Parents don't have lawyers and money, and it's not their job. So it would make good common sense to support such a bill, as long as there are some safeguards in there to prevent frivolous lawsuits. And parents who are like, okay, now we can just go to court every time we have one minor over small things. So as long as it's reasonable and it has those safeguards, yes, I would support it. It makes good sense.
I think this one goes back to, I do support it, but I think this goes back to how we train our staff and how we work with students with special needs. And I think a lot of times in the school systems, kids may be categorized for a variety of different reasons as having special needs, and they are locked into that until they can't get out. I saw it too many times, and I tried to counteract that with training for staff. In 1982, I was the director of an office in the Department of Human Relations, and I was responsible for the implementation of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1972. I think that's the correct date. And the major focus of 504 at that point was to make sure that buildings were accessible the physical buildings, and then it turned into being a part of the education system. But that opened my eyes so much, where I made assumptions about, well, I can get into this building, I can walk up the stairs, that's no problem for me. But that really opened my eyes when I was responsible for the full implementation of that. And now we almost take the accessibility for granted. There are still issues, but we take it for granted. I think the same thing needs to happen with how we train our staff and our teachers, and work with parents about how they can get appropriate services. Instead of, when you turn it into a legal battle, trust me, when you turn it into a legal battle, the kid gets lost, the parents get lost, and we are then fighting back and forth, and nothing is being resolved to educate that child who has the special needs.
I certainly believe that schools have a large role in burden of proof. There's no question that they, like some people have said, they don't want sort of the resources, they have the expertise, and so they certainly should be involved to a large degree in that conversation. I don't think that should rule out the parents' responsibility. I think we all know as parents that we know our children best, and so the voice of the parents certainly should also be a part of that conversation. And like Saeed said, there should be a certain amount of safeguard, because both sides have a vested interest in seeing their desired outcome. So there should be a safeguard in ensuring that what's done for the child is actually correct for the child, and not correct for what the parents want or what the school thinks is best. I do think it touches on a conversation about what is the best place for a child, and it touches on mainstreaming in secondary schools, which is a larger conversation, obviously, that we don't have time for. But I will say that I think mainstreaming special education children on a large scale is not serving the child. It's not recognizing that these children do have special needs. They need to be educated, and they need to be taught to them the same way as every other child in the school system does. So just mentioning, correct placement. If you want to talk about that, we do need to extend the conversation to what is correct placement and how we should be integrating or not integrating children into the mainstream population on a large scale.
Knowing the crowd tonight that I thought we would get, this was something that I started to research. Not having a special needs child myself, I can and say, I don't understand what some of you in this room have gone through, and I can only imagine, because when we advocate for our children, you know, you're in a tunnel, and you want what's best for your child, and we want to make sure that our school system can do what's best for our child. My concern here, and I'm married to an attorney, is that when you involve legal and you involve attorneys, as Fred said, it gets messy. And what I would hope is that, sorry, Paul, what I would hope is that we can figure out a way, the system and the parent, to alleviate that in the long run. Let's figure out a way to serve our children. Let's figure out a way to come together and figure out the IEP beforehand, whether it's mediation, whether it's that IEP meeting, something, so it doesn't get to that point. I think the problem here is that we let it get to that point. And so we need to figure out a way that it doesn't get to that point, because then it just gets messy for everyone. And unfortunately, I think, and you in this room can tell me even better, that in the long run, when it gets to that point, the child is the loser here. And that's not what we want to happen, because somewhere along the way, we aren't serving that child. And it has gotten to the point where we're just not serving that child, and we need to make sure that we are serving that child.
So do you support it or not?
On the surface, right now, as it's written, I do, but I think that we need to look at the system.
The bill as written, is there a bill?
No, there's not. Mayor Montgomery is looking for possibly introducing a bill, but there's currently not a bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My son has an IEP, so we went through the process, and I have some limited perspective on it. And I think the problem we are at in the county right now, and we were blessed with a great principal and a great team. We really had a wonderful experience, so it was very well done. Except what's complicated is he needs a certain kind of help that really, if it's not handled right, would kick him out of the school day. There's always this kind of conflict of whether you want to participate and have that full social experience, and how are you going to get this other supplemental stuff. And so you've got to figure out, right now I think we're good as a county at doing a little, and we kind of do a little for a lot of people. I think the next step is how do we focus resources on these very particularized needs for kids, because those needs are so particularized. So I'm fine shifting the burden back to the school, but I agree that if you're back at that point, it's going to be a disaster, because you're still going to have this kind of mismatch. And what you really need is an approach that sets out and comes back a little bit to budgeting, make sure that there's enough allocated to recognize that you're going to have to provide that for these kids. And I think that's something we should do. So not just because I'm a little biased because I'm sort of personally interested, but I think in general as a society, I think it is a good investment to make, and that we need to do.
Well, this is kind of shifting gears, but considering the large scale upzoning the county is currently undertaking through the CR zones and master plans, the schools may see an unprecedented surge in students. Do you believe retaining current high school cluster boundaries is important? What will you do to predict and accommodate this huge upswing in population with regard to boundaries?
I look at the data. I think that there's no way to answer that question until you see how the development and the population shifts. It's nice to have the boundaries preserved, because everybody buys their home with an expectation of where their kids, many people buy their home with an expectation of where their kids go to school, and if that gets shaken up, it can really rock your world in a significant way. If we're going to make investments to accommodate more kids, I'd love to think that what we're going to end up doing is enhancing the experience for people rather than sort of gerrymandering the district so you lose the benefit of what you hoped you bought into from an investment with your home and with your community. So I think it's important, but I think it's important because it's such a dramatic impact on people's settled expectations of what they're trying to accomplish with their life.
So one of the issues with CR zones and the way our county school system counts, the man that's in charge of this, Bruce Perspell, has been in this job for 20 years. And as we all know, there are significant master plans going into this county. White sector master plan, you have Up County, you have a number of master plans that include new schools possibly going in, you have new high-rises going in, and the way they're counted and the kids that are supposedly coming out of those buildings is really amazingly low. Right now, they're looking at the White Flint high-rise that says, I'm sorry, there are really not going to be any kids there, so, you know, we're not going to increase this boundary because it costs too much to live there or because this building is built for this kind of person. But yet, what happens when there are kids there? There's no rhyme or reason, then our schools get overcrowded. So I think the issue here isn't necessarily our zones, it's how do we actually go about this across the county and how we decide our boundaries from the start. I actually came into the public school system before I had kids in the system because I was brought into a boundary decision. It's a highly political issue. You know, everyone comes out about boundary decisions, and I know our kids today actually cross and pass a middle school in order to get to the other school. So I think we need to look at this on a whole level and then go back to the point.
I think Morris made the point that it's really difficult to answer the question without having a clear understanding of where the growth is going to be. And I don't know that there's necessarily data on it today because this is, you know, thankfully we keep having children and moving into the area, and so this is going to be an ongoing, I wouldn't say a problem, I would say an issue that needs to be addressed on an ongoing basis. Now obviously you can't keep, you know, let's say if you own a house, you can't keep adding incrementally to the space in your house every time you want to buy a new toy for your child or you have a new child. You know, obviously you need to plan ahead. And so we do need to study where the population growth is and where we're seeing the trends, and you have to use some amount of historical basis for it. But we do need to start thinking about how we're going to expand room in our schools. I know that there is conversation underway about building up to more floors in schools, and there's concern about how we police the second floor. And I understand that, but I think that it's a conversation that certainly needs to be revisited because we are simply going to need more seats in these schools. You want to talk about the clusters and whether we should maintain the cluster zones that currently exist. I think that gets into another conversation that we talked about a while ago when it comes to charter schools, that there are the clusters maintain school districts that are gonna continue to have the same issues with a heavy concentration of farm students and a heavy concentration of ESOL students, and so you know I think that this is another area where we need to put all these options on the table, be it building up or be it having a conversation about either doing away with clusters or simply a rezoning the way that we look at it today.
There is nothing, there aren't very many issues that are as contentious as boundary changes and between and among different school clusters. I've seen it, I went through a period when we were closing high schools. We closed Northwood, we closed Woodward, we closed Perry High School, and then in the late 80s we began to reopen schools, which changed the whole boundary situation. I think we have to say that right up front. I think it's an imperfect, I don't even want to call it a science, process for predicting where kids are going to be or where kids aren't going to be. And we have to put that right out there too. I think we have to have all the community groups that have a stake in this involved. And that includes, remember, over 70% of our households in Montgomery County don't have children in schools, in our schools. And those folks have to be part of this discussion too. I know there are some very contentious issues going on right now. Bethesda number 2, Bethesda Middle School number 2, and a whole variety of other situations where discussion has to be held so that we can make good decisions in the given time. If there's no science to this, no process that works now, it may not work in 20 years because the whole demographic shift, whether we're building high-rises or not building high-rises, but we've got to get everyone down at the table because we are growing. And that's good news, that we are growing. that people still want to come here because we have a solid school system, or a good school system. That needs change, but a good school system.
I'm not an expert on cluster boundaries and such, so I think I'll just look at the data and try and use as much common sense as possible. And I know these are very fraught decisions for families that are affected.
Well, we obviously do need to plan. We've seen phenomenal growth, and we're hopefully going to continue to see that, and that is a good thing. But the boundaries matter because the grass is greener on the other side, and because you buy your house where it's greener, as it's been pointed out before. When we moved here, I checked out the schools first within Montgomery County. Lots of people were telling me, oh, all the schools are fine, all the schools are fine, but there's obviously differences, and I could tell them even as an outsider, even without having 20 years residency here. It matters. So what we need to talk about is ensuring the delivery of quality at every school so that people don't feel they have to pick up and move, and a lot of people with special needs, with gifted kids, with special education kids, who want that English, that other language immersion, are moving so that they can get that. That shouldn't have to happen. We should be delivering quality at each and every school, and that quality means that the students are learning and understanding, not hitting scores on achievement tests.
Okay, this is our final question, and it's a question from the audience. Some say the Board of Education has too much control over its more than $2 billion budget, but others say the county council really controls this budget. Which do you think is correct, and how should the education budget in our country be decided? In our county.
I'm going to ask you to repeat the question.
Okay. Some say the Board of Education has too much control over its more than $2 billion budget, but others say the county council really controls this budget. Which do you think is correct, and how should the education budget in our county be decided?
Well, that, as a newcomer to the county, the whole idea of clusters and the whole structure of governance here is something new, and I've had to immerse myself in that. And obviously, the county dictates to the schools how much funding they're going to get. We can ask for how much we want, but the county is going to come back and say, well, this is how much you get. And it becomes a tug of war because the county wants us to prove that we need it. And we're saying, well, of course we need it because we're doing maintenance of effort, and we've always done it. But what are we, all the people in the county are saying, what are we getting for that money? And we can't tell them. So that's the real problem. And I think that the way to address that is to do cost analysis of education. It's something that's been done for special education programming since the 1990s. It's led to great improvements and better decision making in funding education programs. It lets you know what works and what doesn't work. And Columbia University Teachers College has recently opened just this year a new center for cost benefit of education studies. So I'm proposing that the Board of Education add that to the toolkit so that as a community we can say where the money's going, we can follow the money, and we can say what benefit the students are deriving from that expenditure. We can then better go back to the county and say, our students are benefiting from what was happening here, but we need more money for this, that, or the other program, and that is an effective program, and there will be less arguing over it. It will be a more objective-based decision.
So this is one of my biggest issues, and this is the one that only I'm talking about, and that's that I think that we have this crazy subdivision of budgeting and taxing authority between the school board, the county council, and the state. What I'm saying is that just like many other jurisdictions around the country, our school board needs its own separate taxing authority. They need to pay their own teachers, and what comes with that is, eventual responsibility for liabilities and also political accountability. So the people that collect the taxes should be the same people that spend the taxes, should be the same people that get blamed or credited when things go right or wrong. Because right now what's happening is, the school board says, well, we're going to set the teacher salary. The state legislators say, well, hey, you're setting the teacher salary, we get stuck with the pensions. Now we're going to give the pensions to the county council. The county council says, we didn't set these, so it's kind of incoherent, quite frankly. And so what I think we need 3 levels of government with their own taxing authority, spending authority, and political accountability. That way, if the county council, if somebody doesn't like the way the schools are spending the money, they can vote out the school board members. If they don't like the way the county's spending the money, they can vote out the county council members. And so on. So that's what I think. That's quite a bold thing to propose. No one here is saying that, but that's the way it's done in most other places.
It's plenty of information. I'm trying to understand your answer. Right now, and I don't know the answer to this, when the school board negotiates contract with MCEA, my understanding is that unless the county council appropriates the money to fund it, then that contract, it doesn't go through until the county council agrees. Is that the way it works? I just don't know.
I think that's the way it works.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
Okay.
Yeah, but the county council, I think the way the county council says, here's how much money you have, and they can't like fine tune it, and they shouldn't. But right now, the state legislature pays the pensions for those. And the school board doesn't have any taxing authority, so the school board relies on the county council, and when things go wrong, they blame each other.
Okay. All right, 84 to 88, depending on what figures you look at, percent of the $2.2 billion budget is personnel costs. That's what we've got to put on the table right away, that everyone has to understand that. It's a people-driven business. I'm not confident that giving a school board the taxing authority is going to change the tug of war and the back and forth that we have going on now, because that gives a whole different level of responsibility to part-time. Now, because then you got to look at, I'm not going to mention his name because he's going to beat off on it. No. Because then if you do that, then it gives them a different kind of responsibility, and getting that passed is going to be very, very, very tricky. What I think has to happen is that there's got to be a better communication between the county council and the school board and the state legislators, no matter what system you have going. Because going back to our issue of testing kids like crazy and them not getting the enjoyment, we haven't talked about that tonight, music, art, and physical education, which are going by the wayside in many levels. That is a result of a national referendum from No Child Left Behind. And they don't give us any money, or very little money, to support these programs that are now mandated, where kids are being tested in March for the school to be assessed, and we have April, May, and June of education. What's going on in those 4 months after their test on the MSAs or the HSAs? So there are a lot of issues here. I'm not sure that the best way to do it is to just simply give the taxing authority to the school board. I think it has to be a long discussion among all of these. Thank you.
There's actually a dual components at play here. There's the actual direction of the allocation of dollars, and then there's the determination of what kind of budget we're actually looking at. So on the allocation side, the process actually, the player that's gone unmentioned is the superintendent, who actually plays a large role in determining the allocation of dollars. And then the process will shift to the county council, who decides if the amount of money that is going to be spent is actually agreeable and it's something that they're willing to fund, and on the state level that they're willing to fund to shoulder their burden. So whether or not the board or the county council actually has a larger voice, and there are dual roles that are being played, but I agree with Fred that there needs to be greater transparency in this budget process, both for the general public, because if you were to look at the budget, a lot of the line items are actually indecipherable as far as where that money is going and want to talk about 84% is going to teachers. How does that break down? Personnel. I'm sorry, personnel. How does that break down? I mean, how are those dollars being spent? That's a question that I think there should be transparency to that number, greater transparency that is being provided. But as far as working together, I think that we should be talking about joint budget committees, for instance, where prior to there actually being a budget in place that's being tossed back and forth, there's a conversation being held between the county council, between the board, between the superintendent, and whatever other major stakeholders are involved in this conversation, having a discussion about how we're going to allocate our dollars, how much we have to spend, and what this year's budget is actually going to look like. We should ensure that all those parties have a voice in that conversation.
This is not a cut and dry issue at all, and I think that going forward, as our costs increase, as the number of kids coming into our system increases, we've got to figure it out. You know, as some of us said tonight, one of the issues is that the school board can ask for a certain amount of money, but then that is regulated by our county council, depending on the county executive's budget. But then it's up to the school board to decide what happens with that money. The thing here is that we need to make sure that the communication between our school board, our county council, and our state delegation is really fluid. And the underlying question and the underlying thing that they all talk about is what's best for our kids and what's best for the future of this county. I mean, if we look at it from that kind of lens, I think we'll arrive at whatever the answer is. I don't think it's that to give everyone an individual taxing authority. This county is taxed incredibly high. It's one of the issues that people have, maybe not coming from California, Susan, but one of the issues that people have coming into this county, and that to give everyone a taxing authority, I can only imagine what our tax bills will look like tomorrow.
It doesn't mean more tax.
I don't think that is necessarily the answer. I don't have the answer. It's definitely something that we need to look at. But one of the things we definitely need to make sure of is that there's all communication and it's all for our kids, all for the future of this county.
The tricky part about this is that it is true that the school board does not have a lot of control over the budget. But I don't think in relatively recent times, at least, it has been as big an issue because the focus of the school board has been much more of a collaborative focus around education policy and looking at issues that are not front and center related to the budget. The reason we have such a dramatic change in this is because of these lines that are starting to cross about budget obligation versus the ability to pay versus where we're going to invest. So all of the roles, I don't think you've ever seen a case where a governor has simply said to the counties, you know what, this is all now yours. It's really a very unusual move by a state governor to push back massive obligations on county citizens on somehow the theory that it's a separate political entity. And you're going to see a continual ripple effect of these budgetary crises. And the school board is going to be caught in the middle of it and being thrust into a role that really is not something that it's ever had to deal with. And that's why I think, this is the question, I wouldn't give the school board separate tax authority, but it requires a kind of collaborative approach to ensure that our tax dollars are used clearly. Basically what the governor said was, you know what, county, you're on your own. We can keep doing that where we push to each entity their own autonomy and independence, but the truth of the matter is we're all in this together, and I think communication and collaboration are going to be what pulls us through.
All right, we're going to have a final wrap-up now. We're going to stick to the same 2-minute summation, whatever you would like to say. I would ask one thing that you might want to each mention is the issue of transparency, because there have been a lot of problems that we, the citizens, taxpayers, residents have had with lack of transparency at the school board. So you might want to think of addressing that. Yeah, we'll let her. Sorry.
So, yeah.
No, I don't.
Transparency, I think this school board has done a really, really poor job about transparency. They've been cited 3 or 4 times in the past year or two, for violating state open meetings laws. Okay? So they go into a private room and they do their business, and then it's actually a violation of law to hide this from the public. And I think it's really bad, and they keep doing it. And there seems to be no evidence that they're stopping, even after having been cited for violating state law. So I think that's a problem, and I think it is intolerable, quite frankly. The reason why I think my candidacy is most compelling is because, as you've seen today, I'm by far the most independent. The political support I get is not given to me by any other group or person. It's sort of what I've built over the years through my activity in the county. And the person who has left this board was by far the most independent. So for that reason, we need to have another voice of independence on the board. I think I'm most capable of being that voice of independence. If you look at my track record in the state legislature, I'm very independent, and I will bring that here. And the other thing that really we didn't get to talk about much here was just the whole issue where African American and Latino students are just falling further and further, are falling behind our white and Asian students. And that's a big issue. That's one I would like to talk about more. And I think that's the biggest challenge facing our county, our schools. But given these budget cuts that are coming, I will be the person on the board who is a representative of the taxpayers, of the parents, of the residents. There are plenty of representatives of the staff at school on the school board, and God bless them, but I'm going to be representative of the voters. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening. I hope I've given you at least a window into what I believe and what I feel about the school system and my passion for wanting to be on the school board. I thought long and hard about running, and I'm really glad I did. At first, I was wondering, hey, is this the right decision? But I'm gaining more passion about it, and I think I am because of not only my career here, but my love for Montgomery County. I've been here 41 years, and I don't see myself going anywhere else for a while anyway. And I really want to work to make our good school system even better, and that's really, really important. I have 2 daughters who are current students in Montgomery County, and my eldest daughter happens to work in Montgomery County. She's an assistant principal, so my brother teaches in Montgomery County, so don't hold any of that against me. But I get a very interesting perspective from them and from neighbors and friends about what really works or doesn't work with the school system. And I think we do have things that don't work that need to be fixed. And one is the closing of the achievement gap, which is there, which we have worked on for as long as I've been here, and we will continue to work on. And then the ability to work with other county officials. I think I brought that to the table in many, many different situations in my career, of being able to work with a variety of different community groups. Don't believe me, speak to those folks who have worked with me. And then finally, I want to do that thorough analysis of the budget and see where we can make some cuts and where we can add programs based on those cuts to meet the needs of a variety of different kids, because I think we're missing the boat on some of those. And transparency is something that I think needs to be greatly improved with this school board, and I will bring that because that's the way I am. And I want to thank you very, very much for the opportunity to do this evening.
As the father of a 3.5-year-old with another one on the way, I certainly understand what it is that parents today in the school system are expecting from their child's education. I am that constituency, and so I have a kind of understanding of that. I look at the world that my son's not going to face quite yet, but that he will be entering as near as I am to my own education. It certainly looks very different than it did when I was leaving school and entering the workforce. And I think that we need to recognize that 2 things are happening. On the one hand, we're in a sense moving backward, and on the other hand, we're moving forward. And when we backward in that, obviously, you know, the fiscal realities that are out there today, the fact that unemployment is up. We need to think about the fact that the kids that are going through the school system have to be able to graduate and become contributing members of society, to get a job, and become part of the taxpayer base. So we need to be focusing part of their education, certainly, on actual practical things in order to prepare them for life after school. There's actually an initiative in Indianapolis that was introduced by the comptroller, which is to introduce financial literacy courses into the classroom as a requirement for graduation. I mean, I think that's something we certainly should be doing. We see what the inability to break down these complicated mortgage agreements or car loans or balancing your checkbook or credit cards. Those are all things that we can take a little bit of time to teach our kids about, because they're going to need to be doing this when they enter the workforce. And as far as moving forward, I mean, technology has changed so much. We need to be introducing our children to that from the beginning of their education. My son is 3 and he already knows how to play computer games on the computer. This is going to be a basic component of their lives, and we need to be preparing our kids for that by introducing them into their classroom.
I'm going to deal with the transparency issue first. When I worked in the White House, I had top security clearance. And so there were issues that we have to be incredibly transparent because we are always under the microscope, and there were issues that were of top security clearance where you couldn't be so transparent because they were of national security. We need to make sure that we are incredibly transparent when there comes to sensitive issues. It may be involving sale of property, may be involving legal issues, that those are taken a little delicately. Transparency is very important. We have not addressed all issues here today. I really encourage you to go to my website, which is www.jeanellenford.org. There you can see a little bit more about who I am and what I stand for. I think there are 4, as I said in the beginning, there are 4 things that I really hope to bring to the Board of Education and goals that I'd like to work on. We need to make sure that our kids are college and career ready. We need to make sure that we close that achievement gap across the county. We need to help our teachers and ensure that our teachers are able to bring creativity and imagination back into the classroom because of some things that have happened under No Child Left Behind. And we need to make sure that when we roll out curriculum and that we're giving our teachers certain new things to teach, they actually have the training and the development in order to make that curriculum effective in the classroom, and that our parents understand it. I think with my background, my professional career, as well as my volunteer career in this county and elsewhere, that I will be a phenomenal board member. I really hope that I have your support on April 3rd. Know that early voting starts March 24th. And I really thank you for coming tonight. And please don't hesitate to contact me through the website and ask additional questions.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. This has been also our first time to hear each other. And the only reflection I would take away from this is that we are entering, I think, a difficult time where we all have highlighted issues that are probably more significant than we've looked at for a long time. And I guess what I hope will happen with the board is it will retain its ability to be open and collaborative, and if anything, enhance this. Because I think right now we're going to be at a point where debating these issues is going to be contentious. One thing that's interesting about this race is it's a nonpartisan race, so in a way it's supposed to be outside of politics, and it's supposed to be more about worrying about policies for kids as opposed to political issues. The next couple of years are going to thrust all of this very much into the political debate, with over half the county budget allocated toward education, and with 84% of that in personnel and half of that in pension and benefits. These are going to be very political times. So what I would actually put a plea out there for everybody is look through the lens of who you want to be able to manage what has to be a collaborative process, an open process, and one where I don't think the stakes could be higher in terms of defining the future of our schools and in many ways the future of our county. So I have your support.
And our newest resident.
Yes, I want to thank you all for coming and to address transparency again first. Improving our schools is going to require us coming together as a community. That can't be done without transparency. As an experienced analyst and advocate, I have always looked very closely to examine the hard evidence, to let the data speak, to compare current performance against best standards, and to always ensure that every decision serves the student rather than the system. That data is necessary to me. It will be on the table to you. We have to make these decisions together. We have to fit programs to students. We have to provide choice within communities for how our kids are educated. There's a great dissatisfaction and plenty of evidence to tell us that teaching to the test, that stressing tougher standards is not educating our children. They are not becoming critical thinkers. They are not enjoying their learning. We've taken away their love of learning. We have to put the focus back on that. When we trust the learners and trust the process, the scores will come. Dr. Starr has said it, I have lived it, and I want that to happen in MCPS. Because we can and we must do more with less, I'm proposing a cost-benefit model to help us make better decisions, so that we can make sure that the money is going to serve students the best that it can. And this community, I've discovered quickly, is blessed with an incredible wealth of articulate, passionate advocates. When we decide to work together as a community, committed to the cause of our students, we can achieve our goal of improving education. And we need to do that by consolidating all the myriad initiatives, by coming up with a common vision, and by giving every child their wish, their natural wish to learn. So I thank you again.
And I would like to thank all of our forum panelists, and particularly our moderators.
Yes.
Thank you all very much, and thanks everyone for coming in. It looks like a really great turnout. We appreciate it, especially our moderators from Silver Chip, so thank you so much. I just want to say it's our president.